Okay, so we got the recording. We probably have most people here, and so glad to have everybody here on a nice steamy August evening. So glad that Gabe and Emily brought us indoors, and hopefully people have a fan or some air conditioning to sit back and listen and then engage in the presentation. So Gabe, Emily, I think we're ready to turn it over to you to get started. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let me pull this up. And okay, can you see the screen full size? Great. So Emily and I are excited to share with you all an update about our Resilient Together project, which has branding and logo that you can see on the title slide. So we're excited about that. So in a sentence, City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County are going to be collaborating on our climate adaptation and resilience planning processes. And so in this slide deck, we'll share with you some elements of how we've designed that planning process and the community engagement associated with it. And then, interested in your questions and comments, things of that nature. So like I mentioned, stepping back, I think most folks on this call are aware of the climate vulnerability and risk assessments that both the county and city have conducted over the last couple of years, identifying some of the major hazards that we're expecting to see exacerbated by climate change in this particular area. Emily's going to go into that in a couple of slides. So that I'd say that now just to kind of, that's the context, sets the stage for this work. And a little bit of sort of personal professional context for this is that city climate staff had reached out to me about a year ago and said, hey, it seems like we're both syncing up in terms of timing with respect to our vulnerability assessments to climate change local impacts. And we're also getting ready to be working on climate adaptation and resilience planning. Should we be thinking about doing this together? And so ultimately we decided that we would have, that it would be worth doing it together. Emily will say a little bit more about that decision-making process. But the end result is that we will be working together on the planning process and community engagement for producing climate adaptation and resilience plans for our localities with a sense of, looking towards the whole community. So we'll be working on community engagement together, on goal setting, strategy design, et cetera, and drafting plans for our organizations and those we serve. Emily, over to you.
Yeah, so you all might remember on the city side, we are members of the Global Covenant of Mayors. So through that commitment, the city has an obligation to develop a formalized climate adaptation and resilience plan. And we had both, the city and the county had worked on their risk and vulnerability assessments kind of at the same time. And so you all, I know, remember my predecessor, Susan. She had reached out to Gabe and said we should start thinking about syncing up. And then that conversation really evolved over time. And we came to the work with the idea that, so folks who do emergency preparedness work like to say that the first thing that you can do to prepare for any kind of natural disaster or, really any kind of disaster is to get to know your neighbor. And so we kind of have brought that spirit to this work, and we're jurisdictional neighbors, but we're really one community. And we know that the impacts of climate disruption will not respect our jurisdictional boundaries. So it just really made sense for us to embark on this work in tandem and together. And we feel that by the jurisdictional entities working together, we're helping to, weave resilience into our operations and to that will be modeling and actually like building a more resilient community. But we also know that this work can't just happen at the like government level. This resilience has to really be co-created with the community, and we really view community members as partners in this project, right? So like it's the relationships on the ground and braiding together the places where our communities are already strong that will really ultimately build climate resilience. So Gabe, will you go to the next slide? So like I mentioned a second ago, in 2021, 2022, both the city and the county were developing their risk and vulnerability assessments. And they were kind of done differently. I know this county worked with PEC and Resilient Virginia and another consultant, and they have a pretty like long technical and data-driven report. And the city followed, we worked with ICLEI, which is Local Governments for Sustainability, and we followed their Green Climate Cities protocol or process, and heard a lot. We did a lot of community focused engagement around that, and we got a lot of input about, we presented information about the hazards and got a lot of input from the community about the systems within the community that are vulnerable to the impacts of climate disruption. But then even though the like structure of those reports is a little bit different, like the overarching takeaway is the same, and we both face the same climate hazards. And so we took our hazards and systems. Is somebody trying to raise their hand? I keep getting like a little flash. Can we hold questions till the end? I can't really see everyone, so I'm not sure what's happening.
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead.
I'm trying to find how to get my picture get past picture to live me. You know, it just keeps being a problem. Settings
Okay.
not where I left them. I'm sorry, I didn't know I was doing that.
It's okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't like overlooking anybody. So anyway, we kind of merged our hazards and systems from each of those risk assessments and merged them into a singular framework. So Gabe, can you go to the next slide? So this slide has a lot of words on it, but you can see on each of the sides of the slide, the county's hazards and impacted systems that were highlighted in their vulnerability and risk assessment, and then on the other side are the cities, and we merged them into one sort of joint framing. And one thing that I want to say is neither, like even though the county's risk and vulnerability assessment does consider wildfire and it's a very small risk, neither of them considered wildfire smoke. And so as we're going through the process of this summer, working, like doing the work in the background to develop this process and do the planning, of course, we've been impacted by the Canadian wildfire smoke. So we added that to our list of hazards and topics that we want to engage the community with, about throughout this process. And I just think that is such a tangible example of how climate change is here and it's impacting us right now. And it's a moving target. All right, Gabe, I think I don't have anything else to say about this slide.
All right, and James, quick note for you. I think someone else joined the waiting room. I'm getting those notifications myself, so just a heads up.
Yeah, you know, and I've admitted her and it says joining, so I don't know what else I can do, Gabe. Thanks, though.
All right, I'll ignore it for now.
Yeah.
So that's what so what Emily said sets the stage for the project design itself. And so we've spent the last number of months working on in collaboration with each other, as well as other kind of key staff within a larger project team in the city's climate office, the county's climate program, is to create essentially design for the overall planning process. And so this maps out those broad steps. I think that in a much more simplified form, I may have shared a similar slide with Cville100 previously. So the headers might look familiar to you. We have great community engagement and process design person in the county's communications and public engagement office, Serena Guria. Some of you probably know her. So she has a background in kind of public processes and participatory design. One of the benefits of that is having good alliteration and creativity in the names of the process phases. So you can see we have the set of Ds here: discover, define, design, decide, and do. Which is, getting into implementation. And of course, a lot of work has gone into preparing for the process itself. So we'll be launching the overall planning process in the next few weeks. We'll say more about that in a little bit in the presentation. But the grayed out slide on the left just illustrates the prep that's gone into being able to do this in a collaborative way. And then the blue tiles are, the actual phases of the process. So I'll do kind of a quick outline here, and then I want to highlight a couple of different aspects of each of these phases of the process. So in the discover phase, we're really wanting to foster greater shared knowledge of the challenge and create resources to support community engagement. We're also interested in receiving information from community members. So as Emily mentioned, there's a lot of great information in the vulnerability and risk assessments that the county and city each conducted. And there's also gaps, right? There's holes. So the county's has excellent data-driven material, and there's also more information that we'd like to understand from residents in terms of, sort of more localized challenges that people might be facing with respect to, local flooding in certain areas, or heat island and folks' experience of that. And we're also interested in getting a deeper sense, not just of kind of more localized challenges, but also localized strengths that we can build on. Where are people already practicing resilience or adapting to climate change? Where is there mutual aid occurring in parts of the city and county where folks are already supporting each other in the context of, more extreme weather events associated with climate change? So the discover phase is to help us better understand where there's strengths and also gaps or needs in the community that a resilience plan should build on and also hopefully address. The define phase will be to take a lot of that information that we've gathered and make sense of it into key themes, and then be able to set broad goals for what we would anticipate putting into into the resilience plans. The design phase will go back out, have a lot of community engagement, and take the goals, vet them with folks, and then present possibility, sort of possible strategies for adaptation resilience, and really invite the community, different partners and stakeholders to kind of dig in with us and help to define the strategies that will be ultimately included in the locality's plans. Decide will include, drafting up the content and in actually preparing plans that we can submit to our elected leadership to adopt. Of course, do then would be implementing those plans, applying for grant money to do so, budgeting in the context of local government for various projects and ways that we can partner with the community. Something that Emily alluded to earlier briefly, but that I'll highlight here, is that I think it's also important to see that the process itself is designed to be part of building resilience. So it's not so much that, we create a plan to build resilience, and then after the fact, hopefully we execute that plan and do it. Certainly that's part of it. But we also want to be able to have the planning process itself, the community engagement process itself, and all of the information that we can share and explore together to itself contribute to increasing the community's preparedness for local climate impacts. So you probably got a sense from how I described this slide that two of the phases are going to be heavier with respect to community engagement. So discover and design will have a lot of community engagement events in different parts of the city and county, as well as, online opportunities to engage different folks, different partners across our shared community. And then the define and decide phases will be a little bit more, there will still be some community engagement involved in those, but they'll be a little bit more focused on taking all that we've gathered and collected from each of the previous phases that are have greater community engagement, making sense of that material in a way that we can then move forward in the process. So Emily's going to say a little bit more about the community engagement focus and how we're planning on rolling that out in the discover and design phases.
Yeah, so thank you, Gabe. So like Gabe mentioned, in the discover phase, what we really want to do is foster a shared understanding of the challenges that we face related to climate disruption. And so that means, you know, sharing information about what the hazards and the impacts are, but also us learning from the community how they are experiencing the impacts of climate change. So like when we say we want to develop a shared understanding, it's not just we want to educate the public, it's when we want the public to share their experience with us. So we want it to really be a two-way street. And so we are going to, you know, we're launching a website at the beginning of September. We will have a public kickoff meeting that we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then we are going and we'll have, we're going to do a community survey. We'll have some like online opportunities, but then we are going to go into, you know, smaller pockets of the community and have these place-based listening sessions to really hear from the community how they're being impacted. And so we want to hear about if people have already, I mean, we've all been affected by the impacts of climate change, whether we know it or not, right? But some people don't really realize that climate change is here now. But many people have already been pretty acutely impacted. So we want to hear about that. We want to hear, where do people feel strong and ready, and where do they feel vulnerable? If they have been through sort of an acute climate hazard, what was their experience like? Did they feel prepared, or do they feel like they're more prepared now because they learned something from it? And we also want to learn from people. You know, climate impacts are both acute and chronic, right? And so we want to help facilitate people thinking about the more chronic impacts of climate change and how that's kind of having a cumulative effect on all of us. All right, so you can go to the next slide, Gabe. So I mentioned, I think when I was first speaking at the beginning, that we really want to, resilience planning is not something that like the government can come in and do to people, right? It has to be co-created. And so during the design phase, our goal is to co-design strategies with the community. We really do view people as partners in this project, because that's where resilience lies, right? Like in our human systems and in individuals and families and communities. And so we're going to, again, like share what we learned and discover, and then worked with in the second D, which always trips me up. And you know, make sure we what we heard in that first phase was really what people were telling us, right? And so we want the design phase to be very collaborative, and we want to identify gaps in the processes that we already have. And that's something else that I want to say, like a lot of this work exists already. Like there are a lot of, there's hazard mitigation plans and emergency preparedness plans and workforce development plans, and all of this stuff exists. And this work is like bringing us all together and identifying where the synergies are, and then like viewing everyone's work through the climate lens, right? And then weaving those pieces together to build community resilience. So when we say we want to receive resilient strategies based on subject matter expertise, that's also like the lived experience of the community and the people who are doing this work.
Is that my cue?
I think that's your cue.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you've probably seen, if you've been carefully reading the text on a few of our slides, you might have seen the phrase climate resilience cohort referenced in a couple of previous slides. So we wanted to take a minute to share a little bit about what this is. And my apologies for not including some animations to leave off some of this content and kind of drip it in stage by stage. That probably would have been easier. But here you have it, all of it. So the climate resilience cohort is a subset project in some ways of our resilience planning process. And it also is sort of, it's both within and also spans beyond that process. So it's a key piece of community engagement. You'll see on the website materials that we launch that we're really working to center equity and inclusion and making sure that we are hearing from and partnering with disadvantaged communities in the city and county as we work on this planning process. Given, you know, all of well, two things. One, the ways in which the city and county have spoken about, especially our climate programs, have emphasized the importance of doing that work anyways in the context of local climate action, and also all the research about how, you know, folks who may be disadvantaged are also likely to be more impacted by, you know, local climate impacts, kind of frontline communities, so to speak. So the climate resilience cohort is a way to embed that in the overall process. And our intention with what this would be is that it would be a group of 10 community-based organizations that are serving the community that would come together and participate in the process in a few different ways. So one of those would be to be part of the community engagement effort in the discover and design phases, and specifically to hold a community engagement event that really seeks to reach the folks that community-based organization serves in their day-to-day activities, connect with them, partner with city and county climate staff to host an event that reaches those folks and brings their perspectives into the mix. We would do that during the discover and design phase. So we would be, you know, expecting that each of these CBOs can do 2 events as part of the planning process. And then we're also going to be asking each of the CBOs to, you know, nominate or choose a staff person who works for them to participate in a kind of community-based organization staff roundtable that can bring together the perspectives of the different CBOs into providing feedback for our city and county project team on the goals that we're developing, themes we're hearing from the community, and particular strategies that we're developing in the context of the design. That's one way in which this climate resilience cohort falls kind of within the umbrella of the planning process. We're also
Gabe,
hoping, yep.
Gabe, you should mention that it's a funded.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll get there.
like that's good. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'll get there. So that piece is within the context of the planning process. And then there's another piece that we're hoping to be able to support and have happen, which would be to have these organizations continue to stay involved and engaged with us in the kind of early implementation of the climate resilience plans, and to participate in a bit of a continued roundtable on how things are going, and also work on a couple of community-centered projects to help build resilience with the folks that they work with. To Emily's point, so we're seeking to have this be funded. We are looking at how our budgets can support. So right now, city county budgets could support a portion of this, really the focus on the planning phase. We applied to an EPA environmental justice government to government grant that was announced earlier in the spring with money from the Inflation Reduction Act. So the county applied with city as the partner and several other entities as kind of co-signers, partners, to receive about $500,000 to be able to hopefully fund this project and the sub grants associated with it over the course of 3 years. We know that that grant program or that grant opportunity is likely to be highly competitive. But through the process of developing the lengthy project proposal to apply for the grant, it helped us, one, clarify exactly how we're going to hopefully run this sort of program within a program or project within a project, but also the sense that we need to figure out a way to do this no matter what. And so we're also looking to, think about what other kind of opportunities could we seek to bring funds to the table to be able to do this project if we're, if we're not so lucky to be able to receive the EPA grant. So we've got our fingers crossed that we do, but we're trying to think about, contingency plans in the event that we don't. Emily, is there anything you would like to add about this?
I don't think so.
I move on. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a rough project schedule. You can see we are, I wish I had a pointer. I'm like pointing with my finger, but you guys can't see that. But down at the bottom of the slide there, it says we are here. So we are busily preparing to launch the Discover phase. Like I mentioned earlier, we will be launching our website at the beginning of September, and we will be starting the community engagement process. We have a staff, like an internal city and county together staff workshop scheduled. And then we also have our community kickoff event scheduled. Gabe, if you want to go to the next slide, we have a save the date. So we will have our Resilient Together community kickoff event on Tuesday, September 26th at Carver Rec. I know a lot of folks on this call came to our Acting on Climate Together event back in March, where we kind of launched the climate action plan. So it's going to be a similar format where it's a drop-in event where people can come, for the time that suits them, and they learn about the project and provide some feedback and get to like see our materials and stuff. And so it won't be like one single presentation. It will be a drop-in event that's interactive and engaging. So we're excited about working on this project together. It's been a lot of work, and we know that it's going to, be a multi-year project, and it's going to involve, folks across the community. But I think everyone in this group knows how we have to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. And so our climate program work is, in both of those lanes.
I'll add one piece just as an addendum to Emily's nice wrap up and conclusion to the slide deck, and I'll stop screen sharing so we can chat with each other. But one piece that I would like to add, especially for folks in this group where you're thinking about and acting on climate change, a lot of the time. Some of you are probably thinking about it all the time. That in a way that Emily and I often are. When we launch the website and we launch the survey, you'll see places where there's, kind of description and defining language around climate change and climate hazards. But you'll also notice, if you come to some of our community engagement events or take a look at the survey, that a lot of the questions we ask avoid speaking about climate change or climate resilience. And we've worked with our communications office to be very mindful about the amount of jargon that we tend to get into. Most people don't use resilience, the term, on a day-to-day basis. And the idea of like climate exacerbated hazards would probably leave a lot of folks wondering what we're talking about. And so we're putting a lot of attention into our messaging and in ways that we are getting at the issue, but not necessarily using the jargon that's become associated with the issue, and trying to meet people where they are and speak to folks in parlance that more people in the community can connect to. And so I say that for all of you, one, just generally for awareness, and also so that when you go in and you might be wondering, gosh, they're talking about like certain kinds of extreme weather events, but they're not talking about climate change. And climate change is the elephant in the room. We've sort of made it in some ways something that's kind of a theme throughout, but behind the scenes in certain parts of our community engagement, so that we can try to reach folks who may not be able to connect with some of the more technical conversation or terminology.
Yeah, and just a little like funny aside related to that. This afternoon, Gabe and I were in a meeting with Serena, who's been really coaching us on communication. And Gabe and I gave a very similar presentation to this one at, I see Annette on this call, but at the Resilient Virginia conference the other week. So like to a professional audience. And we told Serena that we were using our slide deck as like the basis for our presentation here to you all tonight. And she was like, oh, you're giving that to like a public audience. And we were like, oh, no, this is a sophisticated audience who will understand all of our jargony words. And like, it's okay in this context. So I thought some of you all might find that humorous. And I'm at Carver Rec Center in their conference room, and they just turned the lights out on me. So that's why I'm dark.
All right. Very good, interesting presentation. We do have a few minutes for some questions. And so people like Tom want to raise their hands. Let's entertain those. And Tom, we'll go ahead and let you or Ren kick us off with a question.
James, I also saw there's a question in the chat.
Oh, yes, thanks for reminding me. I'll look back at that. But Tom, go first and then we'll go back to the chat question.
Okay, I'm afraid I have to be somewhat disagreeable right now. It was a year ago, I think, that the PEC-funded climate risk assessment was delivered to the county. And I think a year ago, we had a special meeting here with the PEC and Greenfin, kind of presenting findings and beginning the whole process of explaining what we're up to with the public. And at one point, in the previous calendar year, I remember Greg Harper suggesting the climate resilience planning in the county might begin in January of 23, which seemed very quick, but that's what he suggested to me in a conversation. And here we are a year later. And if I look at when the design process is supposed to take now in this yet again revised process, it looks as though from June to November of 24, we'll be, I guess, formulating policies in response to things that were now known a year ago. So there's a 2-year gap between a lot of sort of information that could be acted on in policy development and when we now anticipated related policies being designed. And given how time critical action on climate change is, I'm just disappointed by the pace of movement in local government on these things. And I'll throw out too, a year ago, some of us pressed the Board of Supervisors to incorporate climate action into the comp plan, and they wouldn't do it. And frankly, we're headed for a comp plan which is almost devoid of treatment, as far as I can see at this point, of climate action. So I'm kind of a frustrated old guy at the moment. Thank you.
Gabe, Emily, anybody want to react to that?
Sure. So yeah, a couple things. One, Tom, I know we've talked about this. Climate action is getting incorporated in lots of places in the comp plan. So perhaps there's some kind of disconnect in communication, but yeah, it's the board's very interested, and I have weekly, sometimes every other week meetings with the long range planners who are working on that effort. So yeah, we can think about how to better communicate that out, but definitely part of the process. With respect to the city county climate resilience planning, yeah, right, it's like ideally we would have done this 10 years ago, 15 years ago. What specifically happened in the process that kind of shifted the timeline with respect to what Greg might have mentioned last year was I started working with colleagues last summer to design a county climate resilience planning process. And we were thinking about launching that in the fall or possibly January. And somewhere in there, I think late summer, early fall, Susan from the city, Emily's predecessor, had reached out about considering doing it as a collaborative process. And we said, yeah, we're interested. Let's have a conversation. So we all put our heads together, thought about what would be involved in doing it as a collaboration rather than kind of independently in parallel. And we decided that ultimately the results would be better, the process would be better, and the outcome would be better if we could work on it together. But, you know, starting from scratch with 2 different offices in 2 different local governments, that takes time to kind of get on the same page, figure out what we're going to do together, and design a process that we think will ultimately make for a more resilient community. I think that, you know, there's absolutely the importance of balancing kind of pacing and quality of work. And I think that some of the way that we've approached this, while incredibly mindful of the urgency of the situation, is also wanting the process to be valuable for our entire community and make sure that we're not doing work that is sloppy or that leaves people out of the process who tend to get left out. So that's been our approach that has led to, you know, the effort and attention that we put into the process design, such that we're, you know, launching it in the next few weeks. Emily, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, I mean, I will just share, I know that Crystal and I, and Gabe and I talk about this all the time. You know, we're constantly balancing the urgency of the climate crisis, which I promise you we feel acutely and like are very, very concerned about, with the need to do this work well. And I mean, you know, just personally, you know, I came from the private sector. I worked in the private sector for 15 years before coming to local government, and it is difficult, like the wheels can move slowly and frustratingly slowly, especially in the face of the climate crisis. But we are committed to doing this work inclusively and well. And
Well, thank you.
That's just the best answer I can give you.
Right, thanks.
Okay, let's keep going. We got a list of questions. We're going to try to get through them here in the time we have available. I do want to hit the one that's in the chat. Gwen was hoping for some comments about actual further coordination beyond just Albemarle and Charlottesville, but our surrounding neighbors.
Yeah,
Gabe,
so
Emily?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, so our regional emergency preparedness plan is done at the planning district level. So that's the whole full Thomas Jefferson Area Planning District Commission, which are a lot of the counties that Gwen listed in the in her message. And so we are not on this project. We have not invited those surrounding counties to directly participate, but we are interfacing with the Planning District Commission and are inviting some of those like regional players to be a part of this work.
Good.
Because I mean, we know really like it's nice and easy for Charlottesville and Albemarle to work together, but the impacts really are regional, and so.
Yep, good. Let's go keep moving here if we can. Bob McAdams, you've been patient. Question.
Yes, this again relates to the timetable and the urgency. And I'm wondering if you have a consensus of some sort where an immediate action is really needed. And there's some things like you talk about the heat island, immediate action needs to be done on the tree canopy. You talk about the decisions that are being made. In October, the city council will make a decision about the fuel to use for their fleet of buses. There are developers who would like to build in the floodplain. I mean, all of those things are moving on a different time schedule, but if there's an immediate action that can be taken, can you adjust your time frame so that this action will not have to wait until the whole project is complete, but you can take action on it on an incremental basis as the need dictates and as the consensus dictates. Furthermore, implementation, who's responsible for paying for it? Who's responsible? I mean, we talk a lot about increasing the efficiency of homes and providing air conditioning in homes that have none during a heat crisis. Who pays for it? Where are the resources to really affect change rather than just design a plan and then have it sit there?
Yeah, Bob, that's a great question. And I will say that one of the biggest, I would say, things that keep me up at night related to my job, which, I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm a climate professional, so like I'm terrorized at night a lot, but the investment that's happening at the federal level right now, local governments and other organizations too, not just local governments, but local government is one of the places where the rubber really meets the road on distributing the funding that's coming from the federal investments that are being made in climate right now. And so Crystal and I, Gabe and his team, we are always on the lookout for how we can take advantage of the federal opportunities. So you mentioned the tree canopy. Like our office has partnered with our urban forester and our grants writer, and we've submitted a grant for urban forestry planning grant and software. And I heard today a nonprofit in our community received a grant to plant trees in our community. So things are happening and we are working to get funding all the time. And one of the things that I often talk with community partners about is, and actually Gabe and I experienced this when we took advantage of applying to the EPA grant that he mentioned earlier. Like we felt like we were in a position to apply for that grant because we had already designed a project that really matched that grant opportunity. So that is how you win grants, is you have a project waiting in the wings where when the opportunity comes along, it's a good fit. So that's another thing that we're doing all the time in parallel, is like trying to think about project pieces and opportunities that will position us well to be able to take advantage of money from outside, right? Because we know it's gonna cost an obscene amount of money to adapt to climate change. And that's not just here in our community, it's all over the country and the world. And so how can we put money to work leveraging other money? And how can we position ourselves well to position for the funding that's out there? And so that is something that we are thinking about all the time. And if anybody has great ideas for projects like where you need a government partner, let's have a conversation.
But you will be, if you see an opportunity for funding and also have a pretty well-defined project that is agreed upon by the majority of people, act on it now and not wait for the completion of the whole design and implement, getting finally to the implementation phase.
Yeah, I mean, part of our work this fall is looking at the opportunities through the, Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure bill to see what we can apply for in the next few months. And also, in the early months of next year. One thing to be aware of is there's a bit of a built-in slowness with a lot of government work at various layers that is often just as frustrating to us as it probably is to many of you. And so one example is like the length of competitive applications for federal grant money, and the time that we end up sort of devoting out of our schedules to have to just do like the one grant application when there's lots and lots of different grant opportunities available. I'm sure many of you are kind of waiting to get more information about the direct to consumer money associated with the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're like chomping at the bit to understand, when is that money going to be made available through the states, the rebates, et cetera. When are we going to be able to communicate concrete information to the community about how, homeowners, businesses can take advantage of it. So some of that we're still waiting on. But there's yeah, part of it with, so it's like, I'd love to be able to apply to 10 grants this fall. That would be fantastic. Probably our tiny team will have capacity to do 2, maybe 3, if we're lucky. So just in terms of the amount of kind of red tape and length of application information that you have to put together to be competitive for some of the federal grants. So there's a challenge there that I don't have the answer to, in terms of the vast scale and pace of systemic transformation that we need, and then the reality of like prioritizing among the different projects we're trying to push forward. How do we carve out enough time to be able to do 2 or 3 grant applications?
Okay, we've got a few questions left. We're getting close on time, so maybe we can at least get the questions out on the table from those that have hands raised, and Emily, Gabe can at least touch on a quick answer on each, and then we need to move on. Bill, you had your hand raised next.
And I'm happy to have this be a conversation later or supplemented. But as I'm hearing this, I'm hearing a very human focus. And I'm not sure what happened to natural systems, whether agricultural or wild. Is that being taken into account?
Yes, but Gabe, do you want to take this one since you
You can respond later, because it's probably better to get the questions out.
Short answer, yes.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. If we could just get the questions, maybe you all can give a quick final comment. Annette, what question did you have?
Yeah, just a thought here, and looking, I think you had a section that was infrastructure and it said transportation and energy. And I was just thinking somewhere in there needs to be called out buildings per se, not just energy, but the built environment, water infrastructure, and communication systems as part of the infrastructure that needs to be considered. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. That's all included under the built environment. We were trying to minimize the words on the slide.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Peter, you've had your hand raised.
Yeah, I guess I can piggyback on Annette's comment about communication systems. I mean, we've seen the importance of that in the Maui fire situation, as well as in the last few days, there's been a bad flare-up of fires in the Northwest Territories in Canada, where the cell systems have gone down. So I think as part of emergency planning and resilience efforts, there needs to be a focus on that. And also, I guess, touching on what Tom has historically been concerned about and advocating for in terms of land use and natural heritage. With reference to the Maui situation, the buildup of invasive grass species that are flammable was a huge contributor to that situation. And I don't think it should be discounted that changes in species composition could affect natural hazards in Albemarle and Charlottesville.
Okay. Let's just as we finish up, I did want to touch maybe a comment that was in chat, or a question. Ellie's asking, can non-government community members help write grants? Wonder if Emily or Gabe want to give a final comment of soliciting assistance.
So, well, on the city side, we've been lucky to add a grant writer to our staff this year, which has been fantastic. But so, yes, community partners can write grants. Some of the funding opportunities, a community-based organization is the grant recipient, and they, either get letters of support from local governments or other partners. But there are federal opportunities for nonprofits or other community-based organizations to be the primary grant writer. It just kind of depends on the opportunity. I guess it's possible that somebody could like write a grant for the city on a volunteer basis. But I mean, that would, I think like if the partnership would be better if the community-based organization was the like primary applicant.
Okay,
That makes sense.
yeah. We need to keep moving, but very good, insightful, thought-provoking presentation. And from Emily and Gabe. So I don't know, we can all give our signs of appreciation, either emojis or whatever otherwise, and see hands clapping. And thank you for that this evening. And thank you also for letting us record the session so that we can share it more broadly with those who couldn't be here tonight.
James, can I share one little tiny tidbit of city climate program news?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Mhm.
I know that this group will be interested to know that my old position has been backfilled and our new climate program specialist started this week. So I know that you guys
Okay.
will all be glad to know that.
We always love to hear about more hands on deck. And
More hands on the climate team on the
All
city.
right. All right. That's great
Let me
news.
tell you, I'm the happiest of all.
Thanks for finishing on that high note.
Yeah.